how we roll there. Some rock, some win, some 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 win.
So, welcome to Zig Showtime number 35. As some people have pointed out in chat, this is a bit of an unusual time, but not really, because it's always been the case with Zig Showtime that we schedule the episodes whenever it's most convenient to the speaker. It just so happened lately that most speakers have been fine with roughly the same time slot. Yeah, so it's like returning back to our roots. We've had Showtime episodes, I think, at the wildest times, at least, from my perspective. I think I remember holding some of them like even in the middle of the night. This is actually fairly tame compared to other occasions. So before I start, just like a couple news items. One is minor news items. One is that we're getting really close to Handmade Seattle, and I will be there as a speaker. I have a talk titled Disassembling Imposter Syndrome. So if you happen to be at Handmade Seattle, please, I don't know, come say hello. It's not just going to be me. There's going to be Andrew. There's going to be also other people from the Zig community and from the Zig core team. So point number 2, I have restarted doing coffee time videos. For those who are not familiar, coffee time is just like the name I give to videos that I make for YouTube. Most of the time I'm like on Twitch doing unscripted stuff, but I've been experimenting in the past with like more scripted videos. And yeah, I've recently gone back to it, and I released a video titled The Kitchen Sink Ending. It's on the Zig Showtime YouTube channel. Where I talk about like funding for open source projects and the kitchen sink ending. And I'm gonna make more. Hopefully, I'm gonna make more, and I hopefully hone the process for making those videos. Because turns out it's not trivial. It is not trivial to make a good video. Anyway, so this is it for news. So let's move to introducing the speaker for today. So Justin is a programming language enthusiast that has been programming since the Commodore 64 times. He has written a number of languages, but this is the first time he has been this serious with one. When I talked with Justin in preparation for this episode, I found out that he had worked for 9 years at Amazon, but despite that, he still has creative interests. You will see that he has guitars in the background, and he also does woodworking and a few other creative things. Please give a warm welcome to Justin.
Hey, and thank you everybody for coming or watching on YouTube. I'm here to talk about DT, which is a utility and programming language that I made for Unix shell scripting. If you're interested taking a look at the language, dt.plumbing is the website that I created for it. It's got user guide and information, and more than I'll go over in the talk here. But yeah, take a look if you're interested. Let me go on. So a little bit about me. So I am a programming language enthusiast. I have used so many languages. I've like on Exorcism, I have mentored something like 28 languages, everything from Prolog to Haskell to Zig and others. Some other, I won't go through the whole list, but also a musician, also do some other stuff. I got two little girls, and that's why I am up late. But I wanted to wait for them to be sleeping and tucked in. Professionally, I think my career has turned into like a software handyman. So pre 2014, I did a whole bunch of different things. I was a high school dropout, so I was a general contractor, did roofing, did realty. I was a manager of a McDonald's. I enlisted in the Marine Corps. A lot of crazy stuff. Not even really going into it. I got a little more serious right around 2010 and landed a job at AWS, Amazon Web Services. I was there for 9 years, and I kind of ended that career as a maintainer of their code bases. So, like, 500,000 software projects use like about 100,000 core libraries, and I was one of the maintainers of that. And I could go into a lot more detail if anybody's interested later. Currently, and then I'll get into it a little bit later, but I'm no longer at AWS. The reason being that they had a different stance on remote work that changed very recently, and it didn't work for my family. Um, Currently on contract at Auth0, which is on a core identity team doing some authorization stuff. And next, I don't know. I don't know what I want to be when I grow up still, but I'm working on that. So DT, what's DT? It's that my shortest pitch is it's a one-liner language. And I rather than get into a whole bunch of weirdness or theory or anything like that, I just want to show what it is. And give some ideas of it. So what I'm going to do for a demo here real quick is there is a Unix utility called sequence or seq. And if you give it a number, it'll give you the numbers 1 through that number. So like 1 through 5 will give you that. And DT is a utility, so I can pipe stuff into it, and the default behavior is it'll just print out whatever's there. But I want to real quick show what DT is working with. So if I do a .s, it'll give me a status. I can just type out the word status to not be super small. Whatever. So when it's getting this pipe, it's getting these entries as a list string, so separated on lines, and they come in one by one. But I can manipulate those. So for example, I could do like add a 1 to them. That would give me the next numbers. I can do some wackier stuff like bind that to a variable. We'll call it n, and then let's say print the star character that number of times, and put a new line so you can tell what's going on. And just yeah, let's do that on each line. Oh, I did something wrong. I didn't double escape that, and I did something more wrong. No, what am I doing? Oh, these also need to be escaped. It's better if you put quotes around everything, just like you're used to. Let me get back to this. Okay, that's what I meant to do. You can tell I've been using this a lot, or it's very new. In any case, you can see it allows for some like general purpose programming. I can bind variables. I can do stuff a number of times. It's got some a little bit different feel than like an awk or a JQ or something similar. Any case, it's sort of that, but it's also like let's say oh, easy enough to do, or at least powerful enough to do this presentation that I'm doing. Can do some fun stuff in there if I put it as a shebang script and evaluate the script. In any case, it is if you're familiar with concatenative languages, it's a concatenative language, so it's like a 1 plus is 2 kind of thing. got like PL is print line or print line. Whole thing can be print line. Because printing and one-liner-ishness is kind of one of the goals of the language. There's a lot of short binds for some of the things you might do quite often with like text processing. Um, it has quite a few things that you might be used to. So like if I have a list of strings, for example, like I don't know, some cats that are famous: Garfield, Hobbs, Tigger. Sure, I can like say upcase them all. Um, the some so what some things I want to point out here. So it's always reading left to right when I do anything. So here I'm creating a, a list of values. You can see there's no commas. Um, I can take a function that would normally be so like if I just like field upcase that as a line, it would take this string, do an upcase, kind of like a Haskell style concatenation with dots in the opposite direction, and then print out the line. And you can see it's not a pure language, but it's got some functional feel to it. Let me move on. Let me move on. So it's got a few inspirations. It's maybe obviously inspired by some text utilities. So awk, sed, xargs, jq, yq, xq, shell languages. Some of that inspiration comes from my previous job being like that maintainer in the guts of Amazon. Because when you're like bootstrapping, like let's say Java, so that the enterprise can use Java, you don't have Java yet. Or if you're doing Python, like you might not have Python yet. You might need to like actually compile that from the C Python project. So got to use a lot of low level utilities professionally for a while. Same if you're doing Docker. Same if you're doing some other low level stuff. It's also got some inspirations from other concatenative languages. So Forth by Czech Moore, Factor by Slava Pestov, Joy by Manfred von Thun, and then Min and some others. It's also got some inspirations from one-liner languages and a lot of stuff that I got from other things. And then also, when I was growing up, there was a show in the Pacific Northwest called The Red Green Show, a comedy show. A guy who is like one of those shows, kind of like Home Improvement. If you're from the U.S., a guy comes on, they do a bunch of guy stuff, and the joke is usually that guys are so silly and they don't have emotions, or they got to process stuff by banging themselves on the thumb with hammers, that kind of stuff. Um, but he had a segment on the show called the Handyman Corner, where he would always do crazy stuff with duct tape. So he would like take two halves of a car and then duct tape them together and like drive off. Or he would he'd make pants out of duct tape, or like a rocket jetpack, like just insane stuff. It's hilarious if you're into that kind of insanity. Google Red Green Handyman Corner or check out the website. It's a Canadian show, so it's kind of like the Canadian. I don't know what it is. It's just a great time. Who is DT4? So as you can see, I'm kind of still working through it and thinking through how exactly I want the ergonomics of it to be. But it's for like awk lovers, so people who are already like doing shell scripting, sysadmins, systems development engineers, like DevOps people. Like if you know awk and you know that like pattern action kind of idea, but sometimes you've needed like I don't really have a pattern that's going to match the thing that I want to do, or I need to do something that's like multiple lines, but I don't want to mess with the file separators or something like that. This is just like another toy for you. It's my gift to the world. There's no company behind this. I'm just trying to make something that's fun and useful. If you're used to like JQ, YQ, XQ, but you've gone like, oh man, I just need something for like plain text. It's like this is also trying to be that. That's the kind of what I'm thinking. And then for people who are already like in the concatenative language world and they've done like Forth or PostScript or Factor or something, it's like a scripting language for you, that'll fit the way that your brain works. Like for me, like I really like the concatenative style kind of reads really logically to me. Like I can just read token by token and know exactly what the program is going to do. And then also I have this idea that it can be used maybe in the future, and some future version of it can be used for large ecosystems. So one thing I've seen is when you have some really large ecosystem of software and you need to like bootstrap it and build it up, there's like this area that you'll encounter kind of between like shell scripts and awk, and then up like some kind of bigger language like Perl or Raku or Python, Ruby, etc., where you kind of want something that's general purpose, but just for like a short little thing, like maybe a shell alias or a small script, but you don't want to do it in something else for some reason. Um, and you don't necessarily want to use those bigger languages because they start to introduce all these dependencies of like, well, I can't update my Linux distro or my enterprise or whatever because, well, we have to upgrade Python first, and Python, everything has a dependency on Python. If anybody's worked through like the Python 2.7 to 3.x, or has worked through like gosh, like any kind of large scale rebase where you just have dependency trees and you have to like think through, oh, how do I move this thing without moving this other thing? How do I upgrade LLVM or whatever? It's meant to be just like another option for building blocks in that area. Um, Thankfully, it's a Zig project. It doesn't have a lot of dependencies aside from just Zig. And I'll get a little bit more into that, but it's a really nice, easy thing to hopefully squeeze into some of these large ecosystems and maybe break some dependency trees and make the do some like refactoring on those large ecosystems. So I want to talk about what does DT need. So I don't need a ton of contributors, and it's not because I don't want to contribute, like work with people. If you have contributions or ideas or whatever, please send them my way. Happy to work with you. But like the other night, I was installing a water filter under my sink, and like my dad was there, and my 4-year-old was there, but there wasn't like enough room for them to help because it's just like under a sink. And so like I was doing the whole thing, and I was like, yeah, I don't really have anything for anybody to help with. And TT is kind of the same. Like it's a very small code base. There's not like a huge ton of things to do with it. But what I could really use is users, and especially like power users who will just stress it to its end and tell me, "Oh, this sucks," or "This could be improved," or whatever. And lots of feedback. And then if people are interested, especially in the weirdness of the language and the ergonomics that it gives, writing docs, tutorials, or stuff on Rosetta Stone, Rosetta Code, or that kind of thing. That's all super helpful. Man pages, that kind of thing. Um, what's next? So I'm still fleshing out exactly what I want DT to be, and I'm trying to be really careful about the dependencies that I take. Of course, I'm still hacking on it actively. So I, of course, like especially today, I'm like, oh gosh, I'm gonna present on Zig Showtime. I really better commit like 5 things to it right now, because that's how my brain works. But I'm still fleshing it out. I think like uh, some things that I know that I need to put in, but I'm still thinking about how exactly I want to do them, are like regular expressions, some changes to the memory management model that I'm already working on, um, some some other like quality of life things that just make it simpler and less likely to fail and do something that you meant to do rather than like just a random thing or a failure. Um, and then there's probably going to be a 2.0 within a few months of this video. Um, uh, longer term for DT, like the kind of things that I'm thinking through are like, assuming people are interested in it, like I'm interested in it, and people have fun using it, and maybe do some actually productive stuff with it. Probably the next things I'd be looking into are standards and like standardizing the language and what it should do, so that you could go and make like a clone in Go, or make a clone in whatever kind of thing might need to exist. Um, and for the kind of people that I'm looking to work with, um, some of the feedback that I've gotten early is like, "Wow, that looks cool," but just tell me when it's in POSIX, and I can use it anywhere. And so, like, there's a in like the sysadmin or like systems development engineer, people who are like working with a lot of Unix systems a lot of the time. What they really want is they want to be able to log into a box and know that something exists. And they'll tend to use older software. They'll tend to use or more stable software that doesn't change a lot. Of course, there's other people who are power users and they know how to like SSH and pull stuff along with them as they're doing it. Um, but a lot of people prefer like, well, I might not be able to do that. I might have to do something where I don't have a lot of tools. And so I want to know exactly what's in there. And so some people are interested in like POSIXifying stuff when it turns out to be widely useful, especially if it's like a utility and targeting Unix type systems. Whether that's going to happen, I don't know. That's like a 5 to 10 year thing, I assume. I also don't think I can really do it before Zig hits 1.0, just for packaging reasons. At least with my implementation, I wouldn't be able to do it. So who knows? We'll see. Um, I want to talk about some of my experience writing DT, and then move on to some of my experience using Zig, because I think I failed to mention it, but it is a Zig implemented language. Um, so writing DT, like, how do you language? Like, what if you're interested in languages? How does a process look like? And in this case, my process was like, I started with a whole different idea of what I wanted to do, and it was kind of exploratory. It was like, I just really want to make a concatenative language. Like, I'm just still really sold on this idea, but at the time I was like, I'm so sold, I need to do one. So I started by like implementing this language I called Rail, and I implemented it in, gosh, like Haskell, Ruby, OCaml, Rust, Go, probably a few others. I think most of those Git histories are still in the DT repository, if I remember right. If not, they're in a Rail repository that's on my GitHub. Um, but I eventually settled on Rust, and then I really fleshed it out. I got it to be kind of like a Rust level virtual machine you could use, so you could like write Rust code and then be in that on that Rail interpreter. Um, it wasn't a VM in the sense that like it could run a bytecode or something like that, but it could run in like the Rust language level. And then I got it to the point where it was um, pretty useful. Like, it got to the Turing complete stage. I could like read and write files. I could uh, do input output. I could do quite a bit of stuff with it. And I was like, what it really feels like is like, you're always in these languages, they're always going left to right, and it's a very strict left to right thing. And it just feels like Unix pipes, because they're also like left to right, although there's like a weirdness to Unix pipes where it's like, it's a program and then a bunch of flags, and then a pipe, and then a program and a bunch of flags. It's a kind of weird paradigm, but it's always left to right. And you can kind of think of it as like a flow of data going through these programs managed by a shell. Um, well, managed by primitives, but whatever. Um, so I created a language that ran on top of that Rail virtual machine, and I called it DT, and I gave it some different semantics about how the CLI for it worked. So the same language, roughly speaking, with some minor tweaks on like certain kinds of characters that are sensitive in like a shell context. Um, and Called it DT, called it duct tape after much searching, but not enough, because there's a lot of other projects called DT, and also a lot of projects, including languages, called duct tape. But I just was like, that's what it is. Like, thematically, like it's meant to be just like a little temporary solution, but there's a saying from Red Green on the Red Green show where he says like it's only temporary unless it works. Which, if you've ever worked in a large code base, you know exactly what I mean. You put in something to do, I'll fix it later. 3 years later, like somebody's sending you a pull request or somebody's complaining about it, and you're like, I who wrote this stuff? And then you realize it's yourself. Anyway, DT was kind of founded from like that kind of perspective of like it's like the glue, it's like the duct tape, it's like the the silly way to do a thing, and then like maybe if it's really good, then you know go back and you write it in a different language and codify it. And if it's not, if it's just doing fine, you just leave it there. A lot of one liners, you can find a lot of one liners in large code bases. um, but then this is where maybe the fun part of the talk happens, which is I moved. I was working at Amazon at the time. I moved at the time. Their guidance for employees was, live wherever you want, be able to be in an office within 24 hours. And so I did. I moved to be closer to family. And then earlier this year, they changed their guidance to no, you must be present in an office 3 days a week, mandatory. And you can read news about it. But um, that really didn't work for me and my family at the time. And I tried for about 3 months, and it was like more than a 2-hour commute each way. And even worse if I like left something at home. It's like drive, ferry, and then I took public transit because I had to park on this side of the island anyway. But the one of the parts of that is there was a ferry ride for me every day, and I wasn't in the best of mood to like do Amazon work, and also there wasn't Wi-Fi access on this ferry, so I didn't have like something to do that could be productive for Amazon. So um I decided, like, I went to a one day I was just like, you know what, screw it, I'm just gonna like rewrite DT and Zig and just see if it's fun. And so I got like a rock star from a vending machine, I downed it, and then I just started like coding like a madman. And I started doing that on the ferry ride each day. And I at the time it was a different repository called Rock, and I like ROCK, and I named it after the Rockstar energy drink because I was just, that was my little ritual, was like I just drank an energy drink and then worked on this Zig project. And it wasn't the first thing I'd done in Zig, but it was the kind of first non-trivial thing. But I had a good idea in my head, having done it kind of in Rust before, on exactly like how I wanted to do it. And so, gosh, it was uh, not a long time, maybe like a few weeks of programming, and then it worked. It was real fast. It was faster than I expected it was going to be. I had like a Haskell compiled Fibonacci CLI that I made that like cheats and just uses all the things you can find on Hackage related to Fibonacci. Like it hard codes the first 1,000 numbers and like has special things. But like one little shebang script that I had with DT could beat that in performance. And I think it's probably has to do with like thunks and lazy evaluation or something. But like it really impressed me because I was like, oh, I didn't expect it to be fast, like that fast. And at some point I was like, you know what, I'm kind of done with the Rust version, and I just I left the tests there. I moved the Zig code into it. I ran the Zig build, and I ran cargo build with the tests, and then made it eventually run and pass the tests. And then later, another contributor came in and was like, here's how to do tests in Zig, and they gave me basically the equivalent of the Rust test suite that I had built, but in Zig. TensorRush was the user. So anyway, I really enjoyed it. And one of the questions I get asked because I like took a Rust project and then re-implemented it in Zig, is like, is Zig better than Rust? And people want kind of like a yes or no answer. And my answer is kind of like, no, what? Like what is your goal? Um, and I think there's not exactly a quick answer to it, but I can give you some for people who are kind of in this realm of like Zig or Rust. I can give some guidance, which is like I think Zig is here to stay. I like that is my experience of like uh my experience of Zig is just like it is going to become mature, and it's like it's got the leadership, it's got the community, it's got a lot of really good ideas. The code base of Zig is still kind of early in development. So like if you're going to use Zig, you're probably going to look at the code base of Zig to figure out how some stuff works. But the code base is like a work of art, and especially in some places where they're doing some really interesting comp time stuff. But if like don't think you're going to get away from like the manual memory management stuff, because you're going to have to start thinking through pointers and seg faults and double freeze, especially if you start getting creative with allocators, which Zig lets you do, and is a lot harder to do in some other languages that are at the same level. And also, Rust and Zig, like I don't think it's a binary thing, and I'm a kind of a language nerd, but I would say like in that same space, like don't discount Go and Lua and Odin and OCaml and some of these other languages that are compiling, because they have similar characteristics. They have some things where they're better at than others. I'm very much a best tool for the job kind of guy as far as like my language choices go. But long story short, I love writing in Zig. It's just really fun, and I think I did some reflecting for this particular talk on like why do I like Zig so much, and I think it's mostly because I'm learning. Um, so my language experience, like how I got into programming. Loris mentioned in the intro that I started on like his Commodore 64, and so like my first language was BASIC, right? You log into a Commodore 64, you get a basic prompt. If you want to like play Frogger or something, you like put in a big 8-inch floppy disk and you write load blank space *8 or something like that. But you're like programming just to even like load a disk. At least it felt like that to young me. My second language is C++, which is a whole different level. That was back in the 90s when like Borland C++ was like the editor, and Turbo C++ was a thing. But in any case, I haven't had to use like had to think about or do manual memory management for anything except for toys for a really long time, like maybe 2 decades. And Zig is making me relearn it, but relearn it way better than I had a idea of how to do things with it. And I think some of that is that like Zig just finally put types on the pointers and the arrays that make sense. Like they make an intuitive sense that I can reason through. And Loris has a great talk on Zig pointers somewhere on like maybe 2 years ago, where he talks through like when you get a pointer in C, you don't know what you have. It's all convention, right? You don't know if it's a single element. You don't know if it's an array of things. You don't know if it's zero terminated. You don't know anything about it. And in Zig, there's types for those things, and it's really great. And so I really like that. And also, there's that Perlis quote. I'm gonna paraphrase it because I can't remember it exactly, but it's something like you know the value of learning a programming language is, does it teach you something? Like if you're not learning something from a language, you might not need to learn it. And so like I've really felt that with certain languages, like learning Haskell, learning OCaml, uh, learning Rust and its lifetime borrowing system, and just having to really think through mutability, and not just the lifetime of memory, but like the mutability and like having only a single thing. Go and Go routines and Erlang with processes and that kind of stuff. Anyway, really interesting languages. They can teach you a lot. Zig is also teaching me a lot. It's also helping me get down to a really minimal, like forcing me to think minimally about my software, which is kind of like like the handmade uh, kind of philosophy of stuff. Um, anyway, Zig is kind of like C but fixed. I think Andrew Kelly said that in something, some presentation, but that's kind of what it feels like. It's like C, but it's like all the weirdness is less weird, like way less weird. There's no preprocessors, there's no if defs. You just write Zig code. Like the comp time is so great. It's like here to stay. Like there's going to be other languages in the future that do the same thing. That's my guess. But it also feels like I don't know, like it feels kind of lower level than assembly at time, or lower level than C sometimes, and it feels more like an assembly, but like high level. Like if I can't really explain that part, but it feels like I have that level of control, which I don't always feel like I have in C or C++. Um, in any case, more Zig experiences. So I built DT in Zig, and I had the idea of like packaging it, right? So taking DT and then trying to get it into the hand of users. And people who are going to use these kind of CLI utilities, they tend to expect to be able to install this through like their system distro package manager. Um, and one thing that I found is that packaging is not exactly trivial yet. If you're using Zig as a dependency, it's not to say that you can't do it. So I got it in like Nix packages. But for example, with Void Linux, they don't have a lot of manpower to get LLVM packaged for all the versions of LLVM. And so they can't get Zig at a certain level without like a binary import. And so that now there's a conversation there of like, okay, do we binary import Zig if we want Zig 0.11 packages? Do we not? And I think a lot of that goes away when Zig becomes 1.0 and there's some stability to it. I think it also goes away once some of the relationship with LLVM gets looser, which is a goal of Zig. But right now, it's not exactly trivial. You like if you're going to create a Zig thing, maybe expect that some Linux distros might struggle to get it early and fast. Also, just like raw pointers are good. Like this is something like in Rust, like you kind of get trained to like really fear pointers because it's unsafe. Or you have all these types. You have RC and arc, and you have boxes, and you have all these things that are kind of abstractions over pointers. But Zig just gets down to like pointers are good and fun and easy to use. Also, just the community is cool. Like the LSP is kind of in active development still, and the guy who's making it is cool. He's always like on Discord streaming. I've only kind of lurked a bit, but he's cool. And there's other people in the community that are also really fun. And I really like Zig. So one thing I did kind of as a side project of DT is I wanted to like help people learn Zig. So there's a website called Exorcism that teaches and has like a participant mentor kind of platform. So you can go on kind of like a HackerRank or LeetCode or Code Wars kind of thing and do some projects. But you can also take your code and then like put it in front of a mentor, and then the mentor can critique your work and make it better. So, I did that for a few different things on Exorcism, and then I got into like kind of helping launch the tracks. And so I helped launch a Fortran track. I helped. I wrote some amount of a factor track. Factor is another concatenative language. It's cool, and you should check it out if you're a language nerd. Um, but didn't get that one launched yet, and then I switched over to Zig and helped get that launched. Some amount of implementation, a lot of review. I won't take a lot of credit for it, but I did help out, and I'm really glad that it exists. I hope it turns into like a good little platform for people to both learn and teach Zig. In any case, it was fun. It was fun to do. Um, with that, I wanna move into thanks, and then I might go into some more hacking and demoing at the end. But I have a lot of thanks that I need to give to people from the fourth community for like just kind of discovering this concatenative way of programming. I haven't done a great job of explaining it or going into it, but I don't really want to because there's a lot of talks. Like Daniel Krager did one at Strange Loop really recently. Um, and I've got some resources later if the idea of like, oh, it only reads left to right. How do you do anything? Why does math look weird? Or anything like that. Um, so some thanks to fourth people. Chuck Moore invented fourth, or he says discovered. By the way, fourth is really fascinating for anybody who's into like language implementations, because it does something where it's like basically an assembler, but instead of doing like a call and ret from like a sub process, it just like grabs like it keeps track of the previous thing. Like it keeps a stack of return addresses and just like constantly shuffles between addresses. It's really fascinating how it works. Any case, Leo Brody is a guy who wrote some books on using Forth and also how to like think through the quality of Forth code, and that kind of influenced me a bit in how to like choose what should be in a standard library and choose also like what a coding style should be for at least my code in the language. And then there's a bunch more. Vesta Stout is the person who actually invented duct tape, or at least the commonly used version. I'll tell her story real quick because it's interesting, and then I'll skip everybody else. But Vesta Stout, so she's like this 50-year-old woman with like I think 8 kids at the time that she did this. She's working packaging ammo crates. Her kids are off like fighting battles in I think I can't remember if it's World War I or World War II. But she has this great idea, like they're like closing these ammo crates, but they know that like people need to open them quickly and they need to be able to like tear open. And she has this idea of like, well, like how about you take duck cloth, so DUCK, like the waterfowl duck, the bird, duck cloth, and put adhesive on the back. And then if you do that, like the duck cloth rips really easy, but it can also hold and it can be watertight. And she told this to her bosses. Her bosses didn't do anything. So she mailed the president at the time, and the president said, "Yeah, it sounds like a great idea. We're gonna do that for everything." And that's basically the genesis of duct tape as we know it, or duct tape. In any case, I've got more notes on it if you're interested in the duck versus duct tape name. And then of course the guys who did awk, some people who did some really great work in concatenative languages. And Andy Chu, the guy who's doing Oil Shell, he gave me a lot of feedback and encouragement as I was going. And with that, I'm mostly done with my presentation. But I might do some fun hacking or question and answer. If you're interested in DT, take a look, dt.plumbing. I also made a quick little site called dt.plumbing/zig showtime, which has a lot of links on stuff. So if you're interested in like CLIs and having like maybe a serious discussion with people who make CLIs or terminals, shells, terminal UIs, that kind of thing, check that out. There's also a lot of stuff on concatenative programming there too, and some miscellaneous things. And I'm Boony Pepper on GitHub, Discord, ditch.io, and some other stuff. Side note, Boony Pepper, it's pronounced Boony Pepper for anybody who doesn't know what to do with that string of characters. I was born in Guam, which is a small island in the Pacific, non-military family, but it's like this little really hot pepper that just grows out in the boonies. It's just like the nowhere lands. Just little red pepper that grows on bushes. It's stinking hot, but it's so delicious. I really like spices. And then if you want to get in touch with me, but those other things aren't the way, just send me an email. And with that, I want to move to Q&A and maybe demos, maybe mad science, something like that. So
Okay, thank
if you get questions, let me know. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you very much for the presentation. That was very interesting, and I'm very happy to see that people are like using Zig to do things that aren't exactly low level. Like I've implemented an allocator in Zig, which I mean obviously are cool, but it's nice to see that like we're moving up, right? The idea eventually is to not don't have to stop at allocators, but move past that. So very glad to see that. So thank you very much for your talk. I see in chat some people have experienced the Boony Pepper.
Oh yes. Oh man, if you have not been to Guam, you need to Google Finadeni sauce. I'll have to write it down in the comments of YouTube or something later. It's the best thing, red rice and Finadeni. Anyway. There's a question on what the false value is written to the console when I did uppercase. So, oops. let me take a look. So this is the status of what I've got. Why do I have false a whole bunch of times? I don't know. I probably got a bug in my presentation software that I made. The 14 here is the number of the slide. So I'm gonna jump out of this and just real quick look at it. What did I do? Let me just less it. So somewhere here, I probably put um, a boolean too many times and didn't know what to do with it. Yep. Yeah. This right here. So let me do this because it'll be fun. This is a larger function definition in DT, and I'll just walk through what it's doing, and then I'll explain the error as I get to it. So this open bracket is like an operator that just creates a new context where everything in that context is going to be deferred execution. And you can take these and just execute them. You can execute them a number of times. You can loop over them. You can map across them. They can be lists. They can be code. There's not a big distinction in concatenative languages. We call these quotes, and I guess Lisp too. And so that's what's happening here. The little /n here is saying I want an n token, but don't do anything with it, even in this deferred context. And then the colon here is a bind. So it's kind of like a let binding, if you're familiar with that, or just you can think of it as a variable binding. Here I'm calling a different in DT I call it commands because it's very like everything is one after another. It's just like you're telling DT what to do, command, 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 command. But you can think of it as a function, or if you're coming from like Forth, you can think of it as a word. It's a function that I've implemented up here, which is just the list of slides that I've got. And then I get the length of that, and then I do the same thing I did up here, where I take this, where I took an n and I bound it. I'm now binding slide length to this value here. Everything binds really loosely. So a lot of times what people will think of when they go to these languages is that it's like having a stack. A lot of times that's the implementation. But when you run some command or run some function, it can have multi-arity on both sides, which means it can potentially take one or more 0, 1 more parameters and can also return 0, 1 or more things. And you compose these, or you concatenate them. That's why we call it concatenative languages. You can concatenate them with other functions, and they'll just kind of figure it out. So if you have a function that returns one value and then another function that returns another value, and then you got a function that takes two values, they fit together. In this case, on this line, I've got something that's producing one value, which is the list of slides, and then one thing that takes one value. So it takes a list of slides and then it gives its length. And then this here is this is a token, and this is something that takes two things. So it takes one value and then takes a token and then binds that value to the token. So here it's binding the length of the slides to slide length. Here's where I got my bug, where I'm taking the slide length and then I'm comparing it with the n that I bound at the beginning. So this would be my slide number in the context of actually running this. And I'm asking, is it less than? Which means it's going to take two things and then produce a Boolean value. And then I don't do anything with it. I meant to bind that to a value and then probably factor it in to be this here. But I didn't. So that's where all the falses come from. And then I'll kind of go through everything a lot faster. So this is something that's creating an error thing. So this is changing the color to red, printing out some stuff. It's using P for print, printing some values, printing some strings, and then changing back to a normal color. And then it will only do that if this condition, so this is creating a Boolean, and then this is consuming an action, and then a Boolean, and then conditionally doing it or not doing it. And then I go on, I take the slides, I grab I grab, what am I doing? I pop off a bunch of slides. I intentionally did this slow so that it would have it'll look like it's going up as you're doing it. But it takes all the slides, reverses them, pops them off one by one until you get to the slide that you want, and then gives you the last one. And then I called it the nth slide, and then I use that in some other things. I eventually use that in the print slide word, which this one just takes a number, does it, shows the screen, and then puts the number back on so that the next thing can use it. And then the next, like the one that I was using the most is this next. Takes a number. It's just implicit, so you don't necessarily have to like name or bind anything. Adds a 1 to whatever number is there and then prints that slide. So that's my little next thing. So if I'm running the presentation, next, but we can look like here's my little problem. And then if I go previous and next, I just keep accruing those because I haven't fixed it yet.
I see. So you consume the number, but you accumulate falses, right?
I'm producing falses and not doing anything with them.
Yeah.
And I can delete them and then just get back to a normal state. But then if I do like next, it's gonna stack underflow because I didn't have a number
right. You need
and
the
I was
number.
expecting a number.
Yeah.
Anyhow, it's a fun, weird paradigm of programming language to play with. So if I haven't scared anybody off, it's worth playing around with a little bit.
Thank you. That was a really nice dive into how this stuff works. Okay, let's see. Are there any other questions from chat? Chat, you have like I'll give you 30 seconds to come up with a question if anybody has any. Otherwise, I think we can let Justin go to sleep since since he's
I'm a night owl.
Yeah. In the meantime, Justin, are you let's say that DT works out and you reach stability and it goes into maintenance mode, let's say. What would do you have another language in mind? Is there anything else that you would want to do?
I have a lot in mind. I still have like a chip on my shoulder from having worked on Amazon's big ecosystem to think through like supply chain issues, try to think through like dependency management. I should put on the last slide real quick because people in chat are.
Oh, it's okay. Don't worry, because you're in the current view, like your webcam.
Oh, it's not even on. Okay.
Yeah.
You're not. Okay. In any case, I put it in the chat. So I've got that. I do have some other ideas for languages. Language creation is a hobby for me, but I think with DT, I'm gonna not be flighty and not be too wild and actually like take the time to do it properly and see it through to the end. So it'll probably be a little quiet after a while, but I'll keep pushing on that one. I have some other ideas. Like one idea is that like there's a lot of languages that use stack machines. I kind of got on this track of stacks and stack languages, and I also got like a CLI that does like to-do list as a stack. But like Java, like the Java virtual machine is a stack machine. The C Python internal interpreter is a stack machine. They run like bytecodes and they run stack by stack. Lua kind of stands out as like a language that is a register machine, but there's not a lot of register machine VMs. But just like one takeaway I have in my mind for that is like a stack machine is really useful, and yet we make a lot of compiler backends that are not stack machines. Like like when you look at the internal representation languages of like LLVM or MLIR or something. So like I kind of have this idea of like making a really productive, like I don't know if it's a dream or if it's possible, but like making a productive like language backend that could be kind of like those, but could be a stack machine. Then again, WASM is kind of that. So I don't know, maybe I'm just late to late to the show on that, but I have an idea of doing something like that. And yeah, I got a lot of other interests. So I don't know. Like I said earlier, I don't really know what I want to be when I grow up. Um, Still working that through. I do see a couple more questions
Yeah, go for
that
it.
I could go. So uh, John Purdy's here. Thank you for showing up. He wrote a fantastic article called "Why Concatenative Programming Matters," and also a great YouTube video that I've gone back to multiple times, which is "Concatenative Programming from Ivory to Metal," I think is the name. I put it on this on the last slide, the dt.plumbing/zig showtime.
Mhm.
Um, but he has a question. Was there anything particularly nice about DT for writing, or particularly nice about Zig for writing DT that I wanted to mention? Um, and kind of yes, but I haven't pushed it yet. So I've got a really interesting like ref counted memory model that I've been working on that I'm going to replace the guts of the current DT with. So at the time of writing, DT is at 1.3.0, and probably pretty soon it'll be a 2.0 with some memory changes and some other interface changes. Um, but I was able to write a recursive memory releaser function that was really short, um, and it could do so like doing comp time. You can introspect kind of like you would in a duct type language on just like what's there, or like a Lisp with metaprogramming. Like what's there? Does it have a keys field? If it has a keys field, is it a iterable thing? Can I run key iterator? Okay, if I can run key iterator, go through all the keys and run free on them. And in my case, free is not like C free; it's a dinit release or decrement of ref count. And so I was able to like get a memory management model that like fits in my head, which is hard. Like I can't say the same of like a lot of languages that I've actually used. Like trying to think through sometimes, like if you do anything non-trivial with C++, for example, and you have to think through like how are these deconstructors working? How Why is it doing a certain thing? It's really difficult for me to fit that in my head. But with Zig, I was able to get to something that was like really, really pleasant to work with. And like it's hard to explain how you could get like this kind of polymorphic thing in a language that is like so opinionated, but it just works.
Yeah.
Um, maybe later I'll have a something I can present on specifically the memory model, because I've been doing a little bit of hacking on that. Um, and yes, there's duct tape on purpose. I wanted to throw something on there. I do actually use duct tape a lot in my real actual life. Also WD-40.
That could be your next
Anyway,
language then.
yeah, then maybe that'll be the next one. It'll be the oily language. Uh, anyway, I think that's it. We're coming up on time. Thank you everybody for tuning in. Oh, hard questions. I'll have to think on that on Humbucker or P90. Um, but thank you for hosting me. Thank you for all the work you do on Zig.
No problem. And also, I would say for everybody in chat, if you want to continue the discussion, come join the Zig Showtime Discord server. You will find Booney Pepper, you'll find Justin, but you will also find all the other speakers from Zig Showtime. So there's like, it's the place to continue discussing even after the Q&A is over. So thank you again, Justin. That was very nice. And with that,
Thank you.
let's move to the end of the show. So everybody, thank you for being here at, yes, a somewhat unusual time, but it shouldn't be unusual. Zig Showtime airs when it's most convenient to the speaker, for the speaker. And that's kind of the point. Like, if you think about it, Zig Showtime is to give a chance to people in the Zig community to come and talk about, their projects, and to have an opportunity to get some exposure, get some users. I think that Justin was using the tool perfectly appropriately when he said, well, I wouldn't mind having people try this out and give me feedback. So, and because of that, having the show adapt to the needs of the speaker makes sense. I know that oftentimes this type of stuff is more tailored towards the viewer, less towards the speaker, but I think in this case, it's a worthwhile trade-off, because otherwise we just probably wouldn't see all these interesting projects, or it would be harder in any case. Anyway, with that said, I hope to see you all, or well, I hope to see at least some of you at Handmade Seattle if you happen to be in the area and when the conference runs. And otherwise, maybe Software You Can Love 2024 in Milan. So anyway, or worst case, the Z Showtime Discord. So bye all, and see you next time.
This is how we